All right, our next panel is titled The New Digital Divide. But I want to give you a little bit of background on where this comes from. So Svenja, Falk, and I have been engaged in a research project on this topic for about the last year, which has been delightful. We're having great fun. And part of the reason, honestly, is that Svenja combines just this sort of tremendous depth of business knowledge and experience and connections with a really deep curiosity. And so for someone like me who also likes to live in both worlds of kind of business and academia, it's sort of a marvelous sparring partner and collaborator. So great partnership. So the project is called The New Digital Divide, and our thesis is that much like we've talked about the rise of platforms, every physical system has an increasingly dense sort of digital layer, an information layer. And if you buy that thesis, that has some important implications. So the issue is we're in this world of kind of turmoil. We've got geopolitical competition, primarily sort of US, China, and these forces are affecting data flows. And we also have kind of three distinct regions that you'd want to think about. The US, of course, the EU, and China, and they all have kind of overlapping ideas, but some really stark differences. And where that ends up coming into play is that when you have kind of battles, if you will, or regulatory changes, that can create some problems, and that's what we're trying to explore in the work. So true to kind of the way that we think about doing things at IDE, we get a bunch of smart people who are dealing on the front lines of trying to figure these things out and then get them to talk to us. And so we'll talk about impact, and we've got these global supply chains. What does that mean? You know, what are the redundancies? Where do you have to effectively think about bifurcation or splitting them? And you know, what are people actually going to do about this? And so with that, Svenja, I turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeff, for the very kind words and for the wonderful collaboration of the last year. Absolutely amazing. I'm so pleased to be here. As you have heard earlier today from Jeff, when this marvelous conference started about 10 years ago, it was all about network effects and how to scale by enabling interaction among users. And what we are now seeing is increasingly talks about regulatory heterogeneity, about geopolitics, about the risks of decoupling, about reshoring, friendshoring, different types of imagining the global enterprise. And in fact, if you look at really latest numbers from the St. Gallen Trade and Policy Alert, you can see that sort of the actions and policies are at unprecedented level. There are almost 2,000 since 2020, and they combine data governance, content moderation and competition law. The IMD of the IMF, Ms. Georgieva, thinks that up to 6% of global output are at risk in the next decade if we don't avoid what she calls a digital Berlin Wall that I can very well imagine coming from Berlin. So where are we today? It is very, very clear that in this sort of environment, which is changing at unprecedented and unexpected levels, that agility and the productive use of data has become more important than ever. And if you want to tackle that, you have to start within the firm with things that you can influence. And I had the opportunity to listen to Hubert Diess, the CEO of Volkswagen, 2 weeks ago, when he was presenting his vision of those new value pools in electromobility and in software-enabled services. And his biggest roadblock in getting there was actually, he said, internal. So this is what we will be talking about with my esteemed panel that I have here today. I'm very pleased. So we have Peggy Gulick. Peggy is the Director for Digital Transformation Operations at Kohler Company. Then we have Peter Weckesser. He is the Chief Digital Officer, Schneider Electric. Mungkol Sarin, he's the Head of Data and AI Ecosystems at the World Economic Forum. And then we have Helmut Ludwig, who is Professor of Practice at the SMU here in the US. So what we will start with a little round robin. Each of my panelists will talk for 2 minutes about the value of data, and then we will go into a panel discussion. You are again invited to either sort of ask questions at the end or post them online. We will then cover as many as we can. But let's start with a view on the value of data. Peggy, over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to be here, so thank you for all the input that comes back, because we like to learn, I think, as much as we like to deliver on the value in the conversation. So we talk data value. I like sort of taking those two things apart. I think companies still look at value in somewhat the same way they always have, right? Quality, cost, safety, productivity, all those goals are the same. I think that's a whole nother panel to have, because I think some of those will change in the next 10 years, right, as we become digital. But that's really where the value is focused. The data piece is a whole new toolkit, right? So we've always collected data, but now we have all this advanced technology, and we can get closer to it at the edge, and the PLCs and the SCADAs, and we just have such better ability to garnish, to gather data. For me, the place that, really I got brought into my last job as a technology role. And yeah, it is, but it's 80%, right? Democratization of that data, conceptualization, trust, understanding what it means, one truth. And then really the experimentation comes back in on the innovation side, right? So I think from the perspective of the job I have in digital transformation, it is all about the data, and we all understand that fundamentally, to know our businesses better, we need to have that data, right? We need to have more data than we ever have. And the ability to drive the value then comes in from that data. But the gap, the bridge that I believe a lot of us are trying to build, and it'll be interesting to hear, is really that democratization, getting that down to the broader organization, the conceptualization, really understanding what the data means, what data we need, and what data we don't know we need yet, and then that experimentation, which I know is always a difficult one. We call it learning, failure, whichever way you go, but how do we get to that next level of using that data to truly be innovative and truly drive advancement?
Thank you very much, Peggy. Mungkol, what's your perspective?
Yeah, so today we talk a lot about network effects. We talk about platform, and as Peggy alluded in the beginning, data is increasingly more important now. So I see new emerging opportunity coming from data, right? 4 things that I'm seeing. One is the new value pool. With more data, with data in the companies and connected data, we see that there could be new revenue streams coming up, right? New opportunity, new products, new service. So there's these new value pools that's coming out from data. Second, I'm seeing new business model that are emerging as we were talking about platform, right? Every business now will need to be connected in one way or another in the ecosystem. So new business model will be coming up. I see richer stakeholder experience from data, right? I'm not talking about only customer, but all the stakeholders that's involved, right? With more data, you will be able to understand your stakeholder, not only your shareholder, your customer, or your user, but beyond your supplier, your vendor, your partners. So there will be a richer stakeholder experience over there. The 4th things that I'm seeing as the emerging opportunity is better decision. So with data, we'll be able to do better decision, not only the decision that is afterward, right, from the analytics, but also the decision that is real time, right? We see that in, I think, in 2025, 30% of all the data will be coming in real time. So can you make decision real time based on the data that you have? So these are some of the emerging trends of the importance of data that's coming that I'm seeing. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Peter.
Yeah, I want to start maybe just talking for a second about Schneider as a company, because we are one of the very big but very unknown brands. Schneider Electric is a company with 30 billion in revenue. In a pure B2B business, we serve industry and infrastructure industries, building and also power. And we are really in distribution of electrical energy as well as industry automation. Now, classically, we come from a very hardware-based portfolio, and we have been on a journey over the last probably 20 years to really augment our hardware-based portfolio with a much more software and digitally defined value proposition. Now, when it comes to data for us, the challenge of data has two dimensions, and the challenges are a bit comparable in these two dimensions. The one is more an internal challenge. As a large company, we do business in more than 100 countries. We have 200 factories. We have 100 distribution centers. And you can imagine with that large distribution, we have all kinds of internal data platforms from our sales operations, from our factories, finance, on-premise and in the cloud. And the big challenge that we have and that my organization has, how do we make that data accessible for people who want to generate insights? And we spend today as a company probably 80% of our time to provide the access to the right data and clean data for people who need insights, who need to run report, who want to derive certain actions from data. So now we are on a clear journey to significantly reduce that effort. So providing access to clean and structured data is a clear objective that we have, to really allow us to really use creating insights and also AI at scale for the company. This is the one dimension. Now, in the external dimension, of course, we have many of our products deeply being interconnected in the business processes of our customers. These products are PLCs, drives, building management systems. They control application and business processes at our customers, and they also collect data. Here, we also have a role, and we have built an IoT platform that collects data from the business processes on behalf of our customers. We don't own that. And then we also have tools which really support our customers through the life cycle, through the designing process of applications, building, and then operating. Here, the same problem comes up, that the data is being distributed across many different business platforms, some of ours, but some competitive platforms in there. And we clearly have the ambition, and here we are working towards building an ecosystem together with our partner company, Aviva, of really an open industrial data platform ecosystem that we use, but that we open also to our customers, to our partners, and also to our competitors. And also in this space, every customer that I'm talking to is telling me that same story. We have all kinds of data platforms on-prem and in the cloud, but we find it super difficult to make that data accessible, to normalize the data models that we use across these platforms, to really be able to create insight at scale.
Agree.
Helmut.
Yes, well, first of all, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. We heard before Jeff that he described to us how about 15 years ago he was running around the industry saying, the platforms are coming. And I want to build on this and using what you used before, our thought process of value creation. You know, you first create value, then ideally you capture your fair or unfair share as a company, and ideally you manage your cost and have margin expansion in this. Now, what's interesting there is the pipeline model and the platform model, at least the successful ones, have a big difference here. Because you're first, when you think about value creation, you usually think of what your products, how they create value. If you think about a platform, it's really the ecosystem. And let me give you two examples that go even back before Jeff was walking around. And this was with this message. You were definitely walking around. And this was at a company I worked for before, at Siemens. One example was successful, the other one, maybe not so. So let me give you the successful one. About 20 years ago, every industrial company had its own communication platform. There was a communication platform called Modbus. There was one called CS275. You can imagine that was a German company. So there are different abbreviations, and everybody was confused. It was great when you were in, because you had your customer locked in. Customers didn't like it that much. At Siemens, we took a decision to put our IP out in an organization that was called Profibus, later on Profinet International, an organization putting your IP out there into an ecosystem. You can imagine there were a lot of people inside the company that said, you can't do this. You cannot give your IP just away. We worked on this for years and years and years. We had a very strong leader who said, no, that's the right thing to do. Lesson learned was the ecosystem created value. The cake became bigger, and Siemens was able to generate every year about 1% market share gain. And still today, when you look at the annual report of Siemens, totally integrated automation, which is based on this, is one of the key profitability drivers of the company. Well, great, that worked. So then we took the next step. We said, now let's look for a humble, narrow task. And who was here yesterday, we talked about healthcare. Humble, narrow task is usually what you want to do when you have a platform. You want to start small and then get big. And we listened to our customers at the time, and the automotive customers. They said, you know, we would love to know, is the productivity on the factory floor benchmark or below benchmark? We said, that's great. We provide all the NC controllers on the different machines. Give us your data. And we go to every other automotive producer, and we take the data, we make comparison, and we give you exactly where you are in your benchmark. Oh, great. Everybody loved the idea. So we started. We called it EPS. We went out. And then the first customer, automotive company in Stuttgart, won't tell you exactly which one, it's one of the two, said, this is great. I really like to see the data of the other companies. No. First, you have to give us your data, and then, no. We don't give you. This is our data. We won't share this one. And this is where the problem with data was. The concept was great. It was a clear value creation, but it was not the ecosystem. And everybody wanted to have the data of the other, but didn't want to share their own data. The system never really took off. We had some individual cases. And I think this was really a lesson learned for us. If you think purely in the normal traditional pipeline value creation, you're probably missing a key element. If you think in ecosystem value creation and trying to get your then unfair share, ideally, then you're probably on the right track. It doesn't mean it happened, but it could be a powerful projection.
I agree.
Thank you very much. We heard all the topics that we will now dive deeper into, the question around value creation, the question around cross-company collaboration, ecosystem creation, and actually this question of sharing data, which we talk about in Germany almost every day. So I want to start with you, Peggy. Kohler has a number of factories, and you have the experience of very successful pilots in multiple of those factories to digitally transform. How can you make it work that you actually scale it across the whole plant family and create the synergies and the spillover effects that actually enable digital transformation across the firm and not only on the factory floor? What's your view?
Small question, right? So great question, and I'm going to go back to where Peter started to make sure. Kohler, I think everyone probably understands from kitchen and bath. We also manufacture power engines, and then we have a hospitality business. So I have about 63 plants that I currently work with in all the same countries where we have different regulations and reasons. But so it starts as, I think we talk a lot about starting small, right? I think we all have seen all the things that make us successful in doing that. But those proof of concepts and the people that get stuck in the purgatory and the limbos and they go on for years and years and years, right? I think that really two key things resonate, and there's more to it. But one, the digital value has to be known, right? So I love the strategy down, goals up philosophy, right? Where you've got that governance, those guardrails are going up. We're taking that toolbox that we have now and we're pushing it down and letting people use it within those governances and guardrails. We also have governances on proof of concept. It should be weeks, right? Not years. And a pilot, right? Maybe months, maybe weeks again, not years. And then that ability to scale it. If it's not panning out at that point in time, it's probably not a scalable solution and driving the value you thought it was going to. You can expand on that, right? But I think that the ability to prioritize the digital value and to push it down so that people that come in and work every single day have the ability to change the way they work. So one of the goals we have right now is to really basically get that almost hub and spoke type style with a smart factory user interface and a big data lake so that we can allow our plants to be innovative and to try things on their own, right? Not 12 people sitting in a corporate office saying, hey, next we'll do this, right? And to really have those employees coming in on a daily basis where they have problems, being able to reach out to, very similar to our lean processes, right? The right place, the right tools, manufacturing, maintenance to help them construct that. But the start small is huge because I think coming from my last role at AGCO, we did digital transformation, and one of the things that we sort of got, probably one of the places that my name got out in the industry was we took one pair of consumer Google Glass and turned it into a digital work instruction, non-conform quality solution for all of our employees. That cost $1,200, right? So it didn't have to go up to the executive office and say, hey, we want to take all digital work and put it on. We started very small. It's almost like having a second job, right? Because you're still having to do your full job, plus trying other things as you go. The value that comes in from that small solution then can be scaled. It's scaled almost by word of mouth and marketing amongst the employees, right? Because I don't know a single employee I've ever met in my entire career that came in not to do a good job, right? And we're always, I look at the leadership, we're failing them and giving them that ability to make their job better, right? When they have an idea and it sits in a box for 250 days that would make their workspace safer or higher quality on the product, right? We need to listen. So, I think taking all that and bringing it back together, the digital value has to be known and understood. That's usually driven top down, right? And then the execution of that, for me, from a success factor, comes from the bottom, right? Not from a team of 20 people trying things and then trying to push those out there. I think that having a mature architecture, infrastructure, and culture are critical, right? Being able to go into, so I have 63 plants, they're not all at the same level on infrastructure, architecture, or culture, right? You need to know where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are, be shoring up the weaknesses, and really piloting in those plants that have the strengths that allow you to be, uptime 6 nines and where you need to go. And then the agility, I think we're all struggling with agility. I've been working right now on an agile project charter for 8 months. So it's like, we still have old processes in place that slow us down on trying to be able to get these things moving forward. And then that innovation culture, I'm back to the bottom again, right? I want to be 50,000 strong at Kohler with all my employees being able to be innovative and know that toolkit and not just, it pushing out from a corporate level into our plants. So giving our plants back the autonomy to spend their own P&L like they would like to do and drive improvements into their plants and then scaling those through those centers of excellence so that everyone has that value. That's the approach that we've been taking. It's not fast, but I think the right approach from that culture and transformation perspective.
Question on that. You were sort of talking about sort of scalability, the need of pilots obviously to be scalable.
Yeah.
How do you confirm that? Could you sort of talk a little bit about this? How do you test whether there's actually the potential to do that?
Yeah, so what we've done is, first of all, we get the voice of the customer, the plants, to say, hey, which innovations or areas are you interested in? What value do you think it'll drive 1 to 5? What do you think it'll cost 1 to 5, right? Just a real simple spider chart we can put together. So before we even go in, we can take all that data from our plants then and see that perhaps plants that are doing like functionalities in a foundry or plants that are doing like functionality in an assembly line, they're coming in and saying, we want this, right? They already know where that value is going to come in, right? It's not us looking at it going, we can put this here. So we take that spider from the beginning, look at where the plants are begging us to come in and help them drive innovation and or data knowledge. And then we take that, we go back to them and say, here's what we saw, here's where the costs are high, here's where the value's high, cost low, right, quick wins. You guys just go do these, right? Quick wins, do them. Let us know how it goes, and then we can scale that broader. So we do come into it from that perspective, but then we do take a space in a plant that is a model space that the architecture is ready, right? My core systems, my ERPs, my PLMs, those are already, right, shored up. My infrastructure is ready with my 6.9s. My culture is ready. That's where we want to go in and actually try those concepts, right? Instead of trying to take it from 0 to 100 in a plant that you have to build all that to get there. And those stories tell themselves then, right? And then we have the centers of excellence. We show each other the improvements. And sooner than later, there's not enough of us to go around to actually take those technologies into all the plants, right? So that's when you get into the agile side, you create the product and you give it to them then to integrate. But the maturity is huge, right? The maturity level is a really big part of it.
Peter, how do you scale across the 200 factories of Schneider?
Yeah, I can echo a lot of things that Peggy, you just described here. Today, we have a certain level of fragmentation of both our business processes as well as the technical platforms supporting these business processes. Now, we are on a path, and I'm deeply convinced that you cannot drive that standardization through the technology level only, but you need to standardize on business process level. And so, and if you want to drive that scalability, this means this becomes a business transformation project and not an IT project. And I've been very vocal in the organization. If we really want to get better here and step up and drive that scalability, that this has to be a business transformation project. And that's organized very differently from a classical IT project, right? It's not that you get a specification and the IT organization is an order taker and implements. But we have actually introduced in Schneider a concept that we call power couples. And these power couples is a pair of a business process owner and a technology platform owner. And I give you an example of our CRM process. So we have established this concept of power couple. The business process owner actually doesn't report into me. The business process owner reports into the go-to-market organization, into the head of go-to-market, which is my peer on the XCOM level. And then we have the second pair in that power couple, the technology owner who reports into me. Now we challenge these power couples in 2 dimensions. And by the way, we have a couple of these power couples. We have them for all of our core processes, for PLM, for SCM, and also for HR, for CRM. Now, we challenge all these power couples in 2 ways. One, of course, we have our daily challenges and things that we need to fix next quarter. This is one thing. But I'm challenging these power couples also in another dimension that I ask them, where do we want to be with our business processes and business process architecture, as well as with our technical architectures in 3 years from now? So and that was a very unusual question, particularly for the business process owner, that they now need to come up with really a target picture, where do we want to be? And from there, we build the roadmap how to get there. And then there's, of course, a couple of strong guidances that we are giving. We want to highly standardize business processes for certain business types. And the guidance that we are giving here is we do as much standardization as it makes business sense. Also not as much as possible, but you could also overdo standardization. And that standardization on the business process side is then supported by technical platforms. And let me make the link to the data layer. The data layer is the foundation for everything, for any business process. And if you go through that business transformation, you need to have a very high ambition to standardize your data platform architecture. You need to be very clear about your master data management processes, and you need to be also very clear and standardize data models, because if you only standardize the technical architectures, that's not enough. You need to be able to standardize data models at the same time. So now this is a journey that we are on, and we believe it's only possible if this becomes a business transformation activity.
Great.
Thank you very much. That brings me directly to you, Mungkol. We heard a lot about being very strategic, about pilots, scaling them, building the right data models. So what do companies need to do to really sort of monetize data?
Yeah, so I would like to build upon all the speakers' input. I think it's very, very interesting from all the angles, and giving different perspective on all of this. I want to go a little bit on a kind of higher level of business paradigm. What do businesses need to do, right? One of the things that I see as a challenge now, I mean, you guys are very well versed in technology, in data, and all of this, but in many businesses that we are seeing now is that the one main challenge is the lack of knowledge about data, AI, and emerging technology from the senior leadership. Right? So one way to do this is to empower our senior leader to understand more. What is data? What is the data ecosystem? What is the data governance? What are the AI ethics, ethical frameworks around that? Right? That's clearly important to me. That I think we need to push that boundary. If not, there will be a lot of misconception about data, AI, new technology, and that create a lot of misinformed fear, right? That would not advance the business. Second that I'm seeing is the way that we are viewing data as a source of revenue or as a risk, as a liability, right? So that is, many businesses are still viewing, using that way of thinking, which to me seems to be a little bit limited, right? As Helmut mentioned earlier about the IP in Siemens, right? When we talk about data-driven value, it's all about trust. So how do we get trust? Is to understand the experience of all the stakeholders and the requirement from all the stakeholders. And these experiences change over time. So we need to commit to value and respect those experience and values of all the stakeholders. So I think what we should do, instead of viewing data as a source of revenue or risk, we should think about empowering stakeholders, our ecosystem as a whole, right? And having data, having a trusted data environment that enable that ecosystem. So that should be one of the ways going forward. The third thing that I'm seeing is that, as we mentioned, I think Helmut also mentioned about the example, is that we are seeing enterprise silos in terms of the data, right? Data are not shared across, and that creates a lot of burden. There will be new business value coming up from data if we share the data and we let the data flow and we think about partnership, we think about ecosystem, we think about platform, we think about the network effects. So we should move beyond enterprise silos, and sometimes it's even silo within the enterprise, as some of you raised upon as example earlier. So that's the third thing I'm seeing. The fourth thing is the way that we are seeing data-driven value for profits and for shareholders alone, right? So we should move beyond that and going to viewing this as an ecosystem. How do we create a sustainable ecosystem that would benefit all of the stakeholders and for the better outcome for everybody? So, so that's the 4 points.
You were mentioning that when you were starting your impulse, that there is a lack of data literacy in many companies. How do we get it? I find that there's not too little, but too much information. So how do you get to the right knowledge if you are a 10-people manufacturing company, manufacturing some sort of pipes and widgets? How do you do it? What is the right channel?
I think there's many ways to do that. One is to make sure that some of the largest companies, right, share their best practices around data. What is data principle? What are the data governance? Those best practices can be shared and can be learned. Some companies, organization, for example, I think the World Economic Forum also put together an AI toolkit for senior leaders. So we can use that toolkit to empower our senior leaders to understand what is data, what is AI, and how about to navigate all the complexity around data and AI, for example.
An important factor might be standards, right? So I think the standards play an important role in scale. You were presenting that very convincingly with Profibus, which doesn't translate well into English, I guess. So tell us a little bit how do you sort of go about building standards in the industry to actually get to scale?
Yeah, challenging topic. And I want to come into this, but I just want to pick up something that Peter Mungkol said about the necessity of different parts of the organization before you go outside, even inside the organization, to collaborate. And I think that's absolutely critical that you, on one hand, have the domain knowledge at the table, you have the process knowledge, which Peter, for example, is in your entity, and you have the infrastructure knowledge. And spoiler alert, there's an upcoming paper talking about democratization of AI, which is exactly this, bringing those parties together, because only then you can create value with these kind of technologies. Now you can read this paper, you can have been here for 10 years, every time listening to Jeff, to Marshall, to Peter, and you still might be wrong. I have to break this news. So this can happen. This can happen. So the question is, then what do we do? And I saw from a board perspective an interesting development at a Japanese company, Hitachi. They started a concept, Lumada. And Lumada was the first thought was of a standard, an IoT platform. The interesting part is everybody wanted to have the IoT platform. And we know where this goes. If everybody has one platform, we go back to Profibus, Profinet, and everything there. So then there was a certain pivot in there. And the pivot happened in the direction to say, well, maybe we have to think broader. We have to think in the overall ecosystem. We have to think in, coming back to you, Peggy, in experimentation. But how do you get this in a very strong engineering-minded entity? You know, you don't make mistakes. You do what you say what you do and you execute on it. That does not fit very well with agile. You know, your description, 9 months to get to the definition of agile, doesn't sound very agile, but it's very often in engineering companies exactly what we find. So what we then did is, or what the team at Hitachi did, is they started projects which created individual value and then said, okay, now let's take a step back and how we get this into a more systematic way of a learning process. And they acquired a company called Global Logic, and what they do is, and I give you an example of what they did with one of their customers, Hilti, is where they said, okay, your product's very clear. Everybody, I think, can connect to Hilti, heavy equipment on site. What is your problem beyond the product itself? They have this very much under control. And interestingly, what they said, look, our customers tell us they lose a lot of these products. Losing these products, and the number surprised me, means every year $1 billion of equipment lost on work sites. That sounds like a value proposition which could be addressed. So then they said, well, how do we help solving it? And this is where Global Logic came in. And the first step was to augment the product, to give there a digital representation, to find the product through RFID tags, through barcodes, an easy way to every day say, okay, where is the product now? Then they said, okay, let's now put all this information onto a platform. So it's not only you know on one work site, you know on all of your work sites, Mr. Customer, where the different products are. And then the next step was, well, we could actually think of this doing it for all the, not only the Hilti products, but for all of the products on the same platform. Well, actually, if you have now all the tools on one platform, could we create a marketplace there? And the interesting part here is every step for itself created value. If you would have stopped after the first step, it would have created value. If you would have stopped after the second step, it would have created value. And I thought this was a fascinating combination of, on one hand, being in an industrial environment with the engineering mindset and still having an experimental mindset. And why did now Hitachi acquire Global Logic? Because this is now the logic in all the different domains of Hitachi to think through where can they offer more than the product, augment it, put it on a platform, potentially a marketplace. And this kind of combination of mindsets, thinking an ecosystem and mindsets of experimentation and still having a strong engineering mentality, which is required in industry, that's, I think, is a winning concept, even though not everything is standardized and you're not the one who has the only platform in the industrial world.
How does that sound for you, Peggy?
You know, brilliant, because it made me think of a couple of really, you know, in the meetings we have, we want our plants to start focusing on similarities, not differences. It's a simple ask, right? Because right now, every time you go in, it's like, well, we're different, right? We're going to do it. How are you the same, right? Let's challenge that. But to your point, when we do that lift and shift, every time we lift and shift it, we come up with more value that we push back based on the maturity of the infrastructure and the architecture. It's a simple pushback, right? You have to have that all in place, but you push it back. And I think that the real key message there is standards are meant to be changed, right? Standards are there to drive consistency, but standards are meant to be changed as you continuously improve along that path, right, of that scaling path. I totally agree, totally agree.
Peter, if we look at Schneider, a very successful company, and you are now on the way to bring it more into an ecosystem play, how do you do that? You know, specifically if a company is very successful, how do you translate a vertically integrated company into an open ecosystem play?
So first of all, this is another transformation process that we are going through, right? And actually a transformation process also for our customers and partners. Now, let me start with the customer angle on this questions. All the customers that we are talking to, no matter whether they are in buildings, in power, or in industry and infrastructure, they start with the same problem statement. Look, we have large operations of factories, of buildings, or of infrastructure. We have lots of data repositories. Can you help us in creating value from that data that we collect in our operations? And this is two dimensions. One dimension is the life cycle from design, build, operate to maintain. And the other dimension is really in operations data from the factory floor to the boardroom. Now, there's of course a lot of companies involved in this, a lot of vendors, a lot of technology platforms involved in this. And the only way to achieve that is to create an open ecosystem where everybody can chime in and create value as well. Lost my mic,
It did.
right? Is it
Coming back.
It's back, okay. So at Schneider, we have decided together with our partner company, Aviva, that we really want to open up the data platforms that we are offering. And probably already today, with our portfolio of SCADA systems, historians from OSI, the EcoStruxure platform of Schneider, we probably own already today maybe the largest industrial data platform ecosystem. Now, we are on a journey to really integrate these data platforms, and the interesting part is we're going to open this up. Going to open up means we will allow third-party devices and products to connect into this ecosystem, and we will also allow third parties to build applications on that, access the data. Of course, we have identity and access management. It's not that all data is accessible for everybody, but the data owner can define who should be having access. But the openness of really at the southbound side to integrate third-party products and assets into that data ecosystem, and the openness on the northbound side to allow third parties, and that could be customers, that could be the trusted partners of our customers, system integrators, that could even be our competitors, allowing them really to create applications and to generate insights into that data. So I'm a very firm believer into open ecosystems which are supported by open platform standards. So that the element of creating standards is a very important aspect of that.
We heard a lot.
And maybe let me finish
Yeah,
on
sorry.
this is very transformational for ourselves, right? And sometimes for our customers, because there's that whole discussion: what can we open up, and how much competition do we allow? And we are very much leaning into the wind and saying we really want to open up, and that means also we have to accept that there is some competition on in our ecosystem.
Just one question, another question for you. We heard in the morning, especially in the B2B space, those pitfalls, that sort of are those roadblocks of strategic or not so strategic openness that then prevents the scale that you wish. So how do you avoid those pitfalls? We have all learned that over the last decade. So how do you move very slow in one place and very fast in another? So how do you do it?
So I think it starts clearly with a strategy that you need to define, right? So and this strategy needs to be discussed within the company, and this is sometimes not an easy discussion. And this is both a bottom-up as well as a top-down discussion to some degree. But I think there needs to be a strategic alignment, which is super important. And we have a very good experience to drive that strategic alignment in getting to a vision that we can even externally communicate. So, and this becomes the North Star for us, right? A vision that we also communicate to our investors, to our customers. Even if that vision is not reality today, and we clearly say that, that's what we are aiming for, but this vision becomes the compass for us, right? And this allows us to align. It's still a lot of hard work to drive that through the whole organization. It's not that you communicate something and everybody is already convinced and changing the mindset and the model how they work. So that needs to be constantly worked on, and that's an active change management process that we need to drive. And then, of course, it's important to also move fast, right? So to engage with customers, right? The proof point at the end is for us, the customers. The customers embracing this strategy, embracing our offering, and then scale quickly. And I think platform models depend on how fast can you scale. And it also, of course, requires a somewhat tailored approach for certain industry. And in the industries that we serve, from industry, building, power, they have somewhat not totally identical requirements. So you need to have an industry-focused approach.
Thank you very much. We only have a couple of minutes left, but I saw your body language that
My body language.
really had to say
yeah,
something. So.
Thank you. No, I just want to add to Peter. I couldn't agree more. And we saw this now with more and more companies that they're not only thinking in technology, but really bringing customers in of joint development. At Hitachi, it's a Lumada Innovation Hub. At Siemens, is a business model hub. So they do where they think much beyond technology. And when you listen to Roland Busch, the CEO of Siemens last week, where he made some very interesting announcements of, they called it Accelerate, a much more open platform. And time will tell, which one will really the ecosystem that takes off. Is it Schneider, is it Siemens, is it Hitachi, or whoever is coming in there? I think that's just a fascinating time to be in and to observe what's happening.
Have a voice, right?
Yeah, and have a voice, not only watching, but hopefully doing. Exactly right.
Yeah.
We have a couple of questions from the online community, but I wonder whether there's somebody in the room who would like to kick off with a question. That doesn't seem to be the case. So there is a question for you, Peter. If Schneider is a leading company, does not have a unified view of the customer through data, is the idea of a unified data platform, customer data platform, really a pipe dream?
So we have certainly a couple of industries that we are serving. So we don't have a totally homogeneous customer community, but we have customers which really come from different industries, from building operators, from people who run factories, people who are in power distribution. So we still see a lot of commonalities across this customer space, right? They all share a good number of very, very similar problems, right? So they all share a challenge that they have large, expensive assets, that these assets become more and more electrical, that these assets become more and more automated and more intelligent. And I don't want to forget one other aspect. Sustainability is one of the very driving challenges for all these owners and operators of large assets. Now, across this customer base, we see a lot of commonalities. We see a few differences, but we still believe there can be platform approaches, right? They need to be tailored towards certain industries, but some of our basic technologies are really suited for that. And our EcoStruxure platform serves all of these industries. Aveva's Connect platform serves all of these industries as well. And so we are deeply convinced, and we are seeing this actually getting traction. So it's not theory, that customers are embracing these platform approaches, and particularly around data. This is the most common question that I'm getting asked in every customer interaction. How can you help us to standardize our data platforms and help us to generate more insights that at the end generate value?
We have time for one more question. That goes to you, Peggy. You talked about scaling innovation. Maybe say a bit more about how to take innovations from local areas such as a plant. So where's that now? Such as a plant to the whole company.
Yep. So that's a common, right? Right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing in most of these plants because there's so much solutioning going on. And I think the other piece is, we, from a corporate solution perspective, we have a roadmap and we're moving along it, and it's not fast enough for some of these plants, right? Again, they're going back and trying to drive productivity, safety, quality, and cost, which they may not be able to wait till 2023 to get on our roadmap and move forward. So, we again, I think that marketing piece is huge. I think seeing the value, understanding the value is huge. And so Kohler does a really nice job of putting out 1-minute videos of neat things that someone witnessed in a plant, where we make it a little bit professionalized so everyone can see it and the owner can talk to it to the broader organization. We have centers of excellence, right? The centers of excellence have been a labor of learning. We started with, to your point, we have that 3-legged stool, IT and the business, and then my team sort of is representing the business side. But those centers of excellence started with those people, and we realized that's just a big mess, right? It needs to be the engineers and the operation owners in the plants that are coming in and sharing similar requirements and sharing how they're resolving a problem, right? So a lot of it is just sheer communication, organized communication levels. The other, though, is that roadmap, and that's that lift and shift, right? Where we know we need production visualization in every plant. So defining that solution through the requirements gathered in that center of excellence. Again, everyone wants to have a voice in the solution. Otherwise, when you come to them and say, look what we have for you, and it's going to drive all this great stuff, and they're going to go, I'm different, right? It's not going to work, and here's why. So garnishing that voice at the front end, is monumental. But the communication factor is really driven, the phone ringing in the offices of my team right now in IT saying, I need that like tomorrow, right? What they just did, I need to bring that in. And in a subsequent place, I'd like to ask a question of these guys, and we can do it off stage. How do you measure, right? So we're all talking about the value we're driving with all these solutions, but when those plants are already doing projects to do quality and safety and cost and productivity, how do you measure the success of digital transformation, versus all those other activities going on? And that's a place that we are morphing regularly, right? It's very difficult. Absolutely. And in the end, again, I think like goals, it'll become if the plant's more operational, who really cares how it got there, right? But right now, we're all trying to understand, I think a lot of industry is it worth doing this? Or can I just go on the way I always have been, right? And I think we all agree it is worth doing it, but the what and the how becomes so overwhelming, we don't know how to get there. So being able to put that value up there in hundreds, millions, billions of dollars, I think drives that flag that people go, I need some of that, right? I need some of that. So, but I'd love to find out from these guys how they're measuring success.
Clearly, you need a panel on indicators next time.
Yeah.
But that was absolutely fascinating. Obviously, what we have seen that companies can and do only respond to the challenges in the outside world by driving very strategically and fast digital transformation in the firm, using data in a productive way, and getting an understanding how to build the scale, not only in the firm, but also in their wider ecosystem, which they increasingly integrate in their strategic and production processes. So that has been fascinating. Thank you so much for this great panel. Thank you for coming. I think we have Peter coming from Germany, so coming the very long way, or from San Francisco or other parts of the US to talk to you today. So thank you very much for your interest in the panel, and talk soon on indicators.